Okay, it should be live now. I will give people a second
to go
to hop in. Yeah, anything you guys need to do, go for it. I'm also going to share it on Twitter really quick. And then we can share chat. I should have done this like 3 minutes ago, but of course not. Okay. I haven't done this in a while. I had to skip last month. I don't even remember the last time I went on live. Okay. It is done. Okay. Hello. Hi, everyone joining us. Appreciate you being here. Welcome to the live show for... This is my husband.
Hello, Carlos. You just accumulated another right.
We will give this man 1.5
One right.
Welcome to the live show for Women, Race, and Class. Thank you all for being here. I'm Rachel. I'm the host, and I will go ahead and have everybody go around in a circle and introduce themselves. Everybody's channels are linked down below. So, Ray, if you want to go first, we'll just go in a circle.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ray. My channel name is Bookmark Chronicles. And I'm really excited. This is my first live show with Rachel, so I'm super excited, and I think we're going to have a really great discussion.
Yay!
Me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi. Hello. My name is Lo. I'm from the channel Lo Reading Things, and I am a huge Angela Davis stan. I have been begging Rachel to do this live show for a very long time, and I'm very happy to be here.
All right, I'm Therese from Therese's Nook, formerly Bookish Therese, if you guys follow. And this is also my first live show with Rachel.
Excited. So, Women Race, I almost said Freedom is a Constant Struggle. I almost said it. So, Women, Race, and Class is a book by Angela Davis, who is a feminist icon. I don't even know how to begin to describe her. So, we were talking before the chat, and Ray and Teresa, you guys said that this was your first, sorry, that's my cat. This is your first book by her. So would you consider yourselves interested in continuing on with the rest of her work?
Absolutely.
Oh, most definitely. Like, she's been on my radar to pick up books, like her books. And like, for some reason, I always forget, which makes no sense because my roommate is also a big fan of Angela Davis. So yeah, she's definitely going to be on my radar for future reads.
Awesome. I cannot highly recommend Freedom is a Constant Struggle. I've read it 7 times. It's my favorite. It's my favorite. So I guess we'll start off with what was something that you found profound that you took away from this book? Lo, do you want to go first?
I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I just have a lot of opinions about this book.
You can popcorn. Just start off.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so before we actually begin with the discussion of the book, I feel like it's important to give a little bit of historical background, if you don't mind, Rachel. This was a book that was conceived when Angela Davis was arrested. Angela Davis was arrested in the 1970s. She was a political prisoner. In the United States, she was accused of aiding a murder, which was completely unfounded. It's a very interesting legal case if you are interested in that, which not a lot of people aren't. It's kind of boring, but it's an interesting aspect of American legal history because Angela Davis was a part of the Black Panther movement. She was considered to be extremely disruptive to the American system and still is considered to be extremely disruptive to the American system. And so she was politically arrested in the 1970s. And as she was in jail, she actually began to develop this book, kind of analyzing the intersections between women, race, and class. And this is a very interesting moment in the feminist struggle and in feminist theory because this is a moment where we are departing from second wave feminism, which is the feminism that we closely associate with the burning of the bras and, you know, all the thing women want to go out to work and stuff. So what Angela Davis actually wants to make with this book is, okay, I understand abortion is a huge thing, going out to work is a huge thing, all of those things are huge things. However, we cannot be naive and say that all women have been subjected to all those issues the same, because they have not. And so, speaking from the point of view of Black women and working women, here's how these issues have played out throughout history, and here's how those issues still affect us to this day. And I feel like one of the most important contributions that she gives in this book is the fact that she actually goes into the inception of the feminist movement and goes into the beginning of the feminist movement, the suffragettes and etc. Everything, they were like, hey, Susan B. Anthony and all those women who were so brave, and actually goes into how much of this was, hi Knox, but she actually goes into how much of this was actually built upon first the structure of Black liberation, of Black abolitionism, how this was supported by Black activists, and then how when they wanted to achieve the support of the women of the South, the Black people who contributed to this process were actually cast out. And so you have suffragists saying that they would rather die than to have a Black man vote before the white woman. And so this actually is very foundational in the feminist movement. And it is still a reason why to this day, we're still struggling with this aspect of white supremacy within feminism, because, you know, it's foundational to it. And so we need to actually step back and try to decolonize feminism in its inception. So foundational work, absolute masterpiece, and it's incredibly important to the development of future feminist thought. So these are my considerations. I try to keep it short. I did not. I failed a little, but it's okay.
No,
that counts.
To be fair, Lo is a lawyer, and this is what her thesis is on in part. So,
I'm sorry.
No, please don't apologize. No, we all benefit, I think, from your knowledge and your expertise on the subject. So I appreciate you being here. And giving us all the context that I did not give. So, yeah, I think that my biggest takeaway from this, well, not my biggest takeaway. I think that something that she focused on was the suffragettes, like you brought up, and really went into a lot of detail that I don't think other books had done until recently. So you could almost say that this was one of the first books, not only talk about intersectionality before that was even a term, but also one that was talking about white feminism and the difference between feminism versus intersectional feminism. So I thought that was just her mind, the fact that she was doing it before anybody else was doing it. I love Angela for that.
Kind of piggybacking. Yes.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
Off of your point, Rachel, is that was kind of also one of my biggest takeaways. Like, we're seeing a lot more discussions on like social media. I see it a lot on TikTok, that like the only way for us to really like decolonize like our look on feminism and like really tackle the problems with racism that we see today is by getting that kind of white woman voice in there, because from what we've seen so far, it's just like if we don't have it, then we don't have like, I'm trying to sound a little more eloquent, but we don't have like the way in to get like to decolonize that. I swear I'll be more eloquent in a couple minutes.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And what I think is most interesting to me is that like when it comes to a lot of issues like this, all of the issues that were present at the start of the movement are pretty much still present now. And there is some progress, but there's still so far to go. And sometimes it's like, it just feels like a never ending battle because you're just constantly explaining the same things to people that have been explained for years. And for some reason, they're still not getting it. And I think for people like us, like we understand we can still learn, but still also be able to help educate others. But then like, sometimes it's just tiring. Like it's the same thing over and over and over. And it's just ridiculous that like, we're still fighting the same battle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what ways do you think, for anybody who might be watching, what ways do you think that, even though this was hundreds of years ago, what ways are the issues between like the white suffragettes, the things that they were doing, how do you think that is mirrored now?
I actually have a very specific example of this. If you think about the situation in Texas, and I feel like Angela Davis has a specific chapter on contraception, on abortion, and how this has impacted women of color differently. And I feel like there was a lot of debate, and I saw this a lot on Twitter, of people who were like, especially white women who are like, I just lost my rights. And then there were Black women and women of color being like,
we never had those rights. Thank you.
Yeah, sad for you, but like, okay. And so it's like, there is this one TikTok influencer, I can't remember her name, and she's so important. She's a disabled influencer, and she's also a Black woman. And there was this one video that she was talking about disabled white creators. And she was like, the thing about white people in positions of marginality, when they are pushed to the margins by any other thing other than their race, is that their struggle is not necessarily to dismantle the system of oppression as much as it is a struggle to dismantle it to the extent that it impedes them from experiencing the full benefits of white supremacy. And so it's not that they want all of the system dismantled. They just wanted to dismantle to be able to exercise white power. And so I feel like this applies very well to the situation in Texas, but also to what Angela Davis is talking about this book, is that when we center this struggle on specific needs, which is also my gripe with radical feminism, but that's another story. But when we center around this specific need, you end up actually forgetting that other people have specific needs and that this violence is enacted against other people in certain ways. And so we are talking the same thing, but it's not only like we're talking the same thing, we're also talking amongst ourselves the same thing. Because, you know, this was published in the 1980s. It's been 30 fucking years, and we're still looking at white women and going, hey, hi. So not everything about you in this world. So let's move on. So, yeah.
Yep. Any other thoughts about the suffragettes being mirrored, the ways they were actually acting then and the ways white feminists act now?
I thought it was interesting that white women during the suffragette movement were so ready to compare themselves to like Black slaves. They were like, oh yeah, we're like slaves in the household. But then when it came down to actually dismantling slavery and giving Black people that vote, they were like, are we that much alike? And we can definitely see that now. Like I saw a TikTok a couple days ago when the whole Texas thing came out, that it was like she was like reenacting what happened in the class, and I guess a lot of the white girls in the class were like crying and like so upset that they lost their right, but they were also the ones who happened to vote for the people who were voting against their right. And they're like, well, I just never saw it like they was gonna get down to like get this bad, but it's already been bad for everyone who didn't look like them. So there's just like very hard to find that like line of sympathy, and then just been like, we told you so. You guys have been doing this for how many other centuries or decades? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. I think that the way that particularly Susan B. Anthony, how she ignored, not even ignored, but like willfully decided that does not matter. The intersect of race and gender and class, the way that she specifically said basically that she did not care, was so wild to me. This really went into depth about Susan more so than I think any other book that I've read has. And at first I was like, oh, I didn't realize that she like actually worked with Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells as much as she did. And then it just got like progressive.
The entire book was like a good 90% shit post on just Susan B. Anthony. And I'm like, I was so happy about it.
Actually did me, because I was like, oh, not Angela Davis making a case for Susan. And then it was not that at all. It was not that. And also Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who I feel not enough people know about outside of the the feminist movement. And then even within the feminist movement, we don't talk enough about how Elizabeth Cady Stanton held up white supremacy. So
yeah, that part was really interesting to me because like I've only ever been taught positive things about Susan B. Anthony. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and then like the suffragette stuff, and when it mentioned her name and how she wasn't for Black people being able to vote, I was like, wait a minute, is this the same person we were talking about a couple chapters ago? I had to go back and I was like, wait a minute, but she said, and now, okay, cool, great, that's fun.
Yeah.
On the part about class, there was a part that it says, so Angela said, woman was the test, but not every woman seemed to qualify. Black women, of course, were virtually invisible within the protracted campaign for women's suffrage. As for white working class women, the suffrage leaders were probably impressed at first by their organizing efforts and militancy of their working class sisters. But as it turned out, the working women themselves did not enthusiastically embrace the cause of women's suffrage. So I think that how is this mirrored today? Similarly, with the whole white women leaving out people of color, how is that mirrored today with class? How do you think that classism works within the feminist movement today?
I would actually like to hear an American point of view on this because it works differently for us.
I think that a really good example of classism within the feminist movement, and really the like activism movement, is what we saw yesterday with that new reality show coming out.
God!
Oh my God!
Wait, I was recovering Saturday. What?
There's a new reality show coming out with, I want to say it's Usher and
Priyanka Chopra and Julianne Hough.
There we go. And they are the judges of this.
Oh, is it the, like, what is it? Like, choose your, like.
So you think you can activist. And I think that that's a really good example of classism because we're putting celebrities on this show to say like, oh, here's what we should care about. But you have so much money.
Yep.
Why don't you just finance it?
Why are we picking small things like or like small amounts of people and then like weeding them out and deciding who gets the money? This is wild. Like I think that that's peak American classism in activism, and I think that that's the best example I can give that's most relevant to today.
Yeah, I feel like only in America would somebody think, you know what? We're going to turn activism into a competition. And you're only going to be rewarded if you have high social media engagement.
Yeah. And imagine how big of a slap in the face that is to all the people, particularly the women of color in grassroots movements who can never get on that show, who work tirelessly to do things like menstruation justice, like menstrual justice movements. And then to have that, and imagine if Nadia Okamoto, who stole all of her work from Black women and then wrote a book about it, was able to get on that show. So she would have been profiting off of women of color getting on a show and getting all of this more money than she already had. Like it compounds. It's wild to me.
You know that most of the like activism is going to be from white women taking things that's going to be on the show that's going to be taken from other persons of color that have been like grinding nonstop to get like even half of what they have now or to get on that show. It's just
exactly.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about the cast too. Oh, you have like Black person, you have an like a South Asian, and then you have a white person. Be like, we're diverse. We can discuss activism because we have different colors on the board.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wild to me. So that's my answer from an American perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very wild to me. Everything about the United States is wild to me. Okay.
That's fair.
On the daily.
Yeah. in that same vein, so I live in Philadelphia, and there is a Black woman-owned company that is called The Spot. It's like a period hub. So they have people donate menstrual products to them, and they literally, right now, I think Tuesdays and Thursdays are their delivery days. They literally pack up their car multiple times, have to drive all over the city, giving products to people who cannot afford them. And so they have people donate bras and underwear and menstrual products, and sometimes even just regular toiletries like toothpaste, toothbrushes, and things like that. And they've been asking for support. And like, so at my job, I work in a Center for Black Culture. So I've been able to help them out a little bit. And we did like a drive for them and everything. But when they reach out to the most popular menstrual product brands, they're not getting any support. But there are white women in the city who are doing something similar, but on a much smaller scale, who have their support. So seeing that, it's like, it's so frustrating because they're doing such great work. And so the owner, her name is Lynette Medley, and she's absolutely fantastic. They do a lot of work, not only with getting people products, but like helping girls understand that your period is not weird. It's not something to be ashamed of. Like, it's okay to take time off from school or from work when you're in pain and you're having all these crazy things happening with your body. But the lack of support that they've been getting is astonishing, and it's really frustrating. And so right now they're trying to, they have a GoFundMe. They're trying to get a van, because literally it's just two of them. It's a mother-daughter duo, and they are literally just driving back and forth all day long, all over Philadelphia on Tuesdays and Thursdays, trying to help people out.
Jesus. Yeah.
That is amazing effort, but it's very frustrating that it doesn't get any traction.
Yeah. The most support they've gotten is actually from a Canadian brand, but none of the like top American brands.
Oh God.
Just that we are an embarrassment.
Yeah, it's just
a statement.
No, yeah, I say this because it's interesting for me, because Angela Davis herself, in the many times that she has come to Brazil, she actually notes that the intricacies of how race works in Brazil are very different from the way that race works in the United States. Race and class cannot be divorced. And so there is an aspect of forced impoverishment of Black people that is undeniable in Brazil. But like the richer you are, the more likely people will simply let go of the fact that you might be a person of color, depending on how much money you have. So, which is like, for instance, Brazilian soccer players who tend to be paid a lot and come from very humble beginnings, whenever they go abroad and they suffer like a racist sort of injury or something like that, they get really shocked, because at the moment that you have some sort of economic power in Brazil, that certain thing doesn't necessarily start happening to you anymore. And so it's very interesting, because the working class in Brazil, the white working class, was never really that divided from the Black working class, the other people of color working class, because from the moment that everybody is kind of lumped in together, they're mostly seen as, you know, there are some racial differences. Of course there are. Brazil is extremely racist as a country, but it's very different on the way that it works. So this part, it felt more like I was reading like an anthropological report on someone telling me like how another situation worked. And I feel like there is a distinct lack on this study on how it works exactly in other countries who also struggled with slavery. Because the slavery that she recounts in this book and the way that slavery works in this book that she recounts is definitely not the same way that it worked in Brazil. It's vastly different. And this has vastly different impacts and vastly different cultural impacts in the world. And so Brazil is never a country that was able to create a one-drop rule. Brazil was never a country that was able to create particular pockets of certain cultures. This was never a thing that happened because of this forced mixing that occurred. So this part was interesting to me, and kind of seeing like the flip side of, you know, what could have happened here had we not just genocided literally everything that walked into this land, which was the case. And so, yeah, I don't know how to articulate that in Brazil. it's still very something that it's kind of because of a very harsh, like, by the time that these women were discussing votes for women, Brazil still had slavery. And by the time that, you know, slavery in Brazil only was abolished in 1888. And so it's still very recent in terms of the impact that happened in the things that she discusses after this impact had happened. And, you know, it's confusing to think about that. I feel like this is the most confusing part of the book to me, simply because I don't have the cultural background to kind of back it. So yeah.
It is pretty incredible though how much you know about the US.
So that's colonialism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's incredible because it's on purpose. I should say it's
everything that I have learned was against my will.
So the reason for that is because the US, to put it nicely, imposes itself on others.
Don't put it nicely.
Okay, the US thinks Brazil is its own personal backyard. You know, it does with it whatever the fuck it wants. It's you know, we have to be a little bit on the, who's gonna coop us today? But you know, to the FBI agent watching, that's not a joke.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
It's not.
It's a joke, FBI man.
Come on, John. It's okay. You get the jokes.
God, for sure. Speaking of American imperialism, what did we? I don't know how much you, Therese, or Ray read into like capitalist. Talking about the intersection of how capitalism oppresses people, right? So what were your thoughts on that theme in this book? Because that's something Angela Davis talks quite a bit about. She does subscribe to Marxism, so she's very smart and very, I love her so much. She talks about in Freedom is a Constant Struggle. I know I'm bringing it up again, but she talks a lot about how under capitalism, everybody is seen as basically nothing, but that is expanded upon when you are a person of color or when you are a woman, and how, you know, that intersects and compounds. So was this sort of an introduction for you, or were you like, what was your experience reading this book and hearing her talk about capitalism and how great it is?
I do need to read a lot more on capitalism.
Me too.
What I remember is from college, and college seems light years away. So this was kind of like not an introduction, but like a reminder on it, and just almost like a slap in the face, because I was just like, capitalism, I need to remember. But it was definitely interesting to kind of see, goodness, my brain is trying so hard to remember what I read, and it's just, Ray, take it away while I try to remember.
Yeah, I agree. It was sort of like a more of a reintroduction on something that, I don't know, maybe like I just didn't spend a lot of time learning about it. Like when I was a freshman in college, I took a political science class that was something along the lines of diversity, equity, and inequality or something like that. And so we talked about it pretty much. That was like the only time really that in college capitalism was addressed. So again, that feels like a million years ago. But definitely something that I personally would like to read more about. So if Rachel and Lo have recommendations, I would really appreciate that. I'm sure
Lo is the one to ask.
I am what the kids would call a red diaper baby. I was raised by actual communists. I this was definitely, I think, like, beyond thinking, I think there is this sort of kind of idea of more or less trying to take away Angela Davis from how
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. It was like, and their previous comment too is like, it is such like so ingrained. It's like I find it hard to read.
Yeah.
Because there's so much.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
It
I
is
feel like
talking about air. It's like, yeah, it's so normalized. I don't know how to talk about air. I just breathe it. That's exactly how capitalism is. And Jerry's right.
It's like
happens.
this is insane.
Yeah. It's like trying to describe the color red without using the word red. Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, this is insane because Latin America has a very strong foundation of Marxist studies, like the Communist Manifesto was a required reading for me in middle school. Like I read it the first time when I was 12 and I had to read it for history class. And it's a whole other universe, but what I was trying to say, I mean, yeah. I am so sorry because like it is interesting to see, and I think this ties a little to what I was trying to say. Like people, usually I see a lot of this. There's this attempt to try to divorce Angela Davis to how deeply embedded into Marxism she is. And like we were talking, black feminists, let's talk Angela Davis. Yes, but Angela Davis is not only a huge thinker of feminism and black feminists, she's also a major Marxist and a major name in Marxism. And so whenever we're discussing actual Marxist theory, we cannot let the evaluation that Angela Davis, because she actually pokes fun at Marxists too. And this is kind of interesting because she's like, we cannot go towards a class analysis because there are many Marxists that will go and say, whenever we topple capitalism, those systems will cease to exist because they are products of capitalism, which is not necessarily true, but also not a lie either. I can go a little bit into it if you all agree, but the thing is that she also makes this critique on actual orthodox Marxism and going like, hey, great thing about class analysis and historical materialism, that's awesome, but also like you're forgetting race. And like, even if you bring about the revolution tomorrow, that does not erase the centuries of history of Black exploitation in this world. And so like, you need some sort of reconciliation. And she actually kind of points this out in this book in many instances of like how the struggle towards the liberation from capitalism cannot be divorced from an anti-racist struggle, cannot be divorced from an anti-sexist struggle. Like all those struggles need to go together. And it's a very orthodox Marxist position to be in, to be like, oh no, when the revolution comes, all of that's going to be solved. Or even to go and be like, oh, you're talking about this, you're taking away from the class struggle. And then you're actually like feeding into capitalism because you're taking the attention away from the critique of capitalism. But critiquing racism is also critiquing capitalism. Like, you know, we were talking a little bit before we went live about my thesis. And the point is this, like the law upholds marginalized people because capitalism needs to exploit people in different ways. It needs cheap labor. It needs, you know, it's very ingrained in that. And like when you're talking about and she actually mentions this a little on one of her chapters when she talks about housework, that there is a need to control reproductive work and reproduction work because you need to control the labor force. You need to control the laborers. However, women talking about being housewives and etc. Black women have been doing that labor. So like, you know, you can't make this critique on how this labor needs to exist without actually going behind and being like, okay, but how have we done the labor of housekeeping? How have we historically done the labor of raising kids? You know, you can't simply discuss capitalism and not discuss the colonial figure of a wet nurse, you know. And it's like in Brazil, this was very widespread to the point where white women and the white slave owners seldom, if ever, nursed their children because there was always going to be a slave that was actually going to do this work. And so it's very tied together to the development of capitalism, the development of such structures. And if you don't actually talk about them, then how else are you going to tackle capitalism in itself? So I feel like it's not an introduction to me by any means. My dad truly introduced me to socialism and communism way before I even knew what that was. But it's definitely like the more that I read it, the more it deepens my understanding of it because she's just that good. She's just that good. It's amazing. I love this woman so much.
So, and Jerry brought up much of socialist theory is inaccessible to people outside of the academia, which is a sad irony. And Lo and I talked about how this is a problem and how Lo gave me a really good book recommendation, which is Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. And actually, Angela Davis talks about this in the book, how education, how slaves saw education as their way out. And clearly, so did the white supremacists, because that's why they said absolutely no education.
Yes.
So what were everyone's thoughts on that particular part of the book about the I didn't know so much of that, and I just, Angela, I just anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you guys can go.
Oh.
I've talked a lot. I'm sorry.
Oh no, don't apologize.
we love
I am a sponge.
So basically, what were your thoughts on how Angela Davis talks about how making education accessible was so vital to moving forward and progressing away from where we were at. Oh, also
feminism's for everybody. So good.
So thoughts on the education component. Did you learn anything? Did this remind you of a different text? That kind of thing, other than Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is so good.
Kind of just the concept that I don't remember where or what book I learned it from, but the concept that like they want to keep you stupid. So that way you'll do whatever they need you to do. Because like, how are you supposed to fight against the thing oppressing you if you have no knowledge or no idea of what they're using or how exactly you're oppressed? The only way to do that is to keep you, for lack of better terms, unintelligent in their eyes. So that way they can keep holding whatever it is they're holding above you. They can keep seeing you as a lesser being on top of that because you are not same level of them intellectually. That made any sense.
Yeah,
that made a lot of sense.
That reminds me that Bo earlier said that they, in her school, it was required reading to read the Communist Manifesto. Here in the United States, especially where I live in Florida in the South, we would never be allowed to read that. Parents would be up in arms over that because of McCarthyism, and that really all stems from not wanting to make any critiques of capitalism. And we also see that the United States is in a place where in education, they don't want you to make critiques of not only capitalism, but also racism and of sexism and of classism.
We're also seeing that in Texas by them rearranging the curriculum and taking out all this different texts that will require kids to like question.
Calling everything critical race theory, saying critical race theory is bad, take it out of schools, even though they don't know what that is. They conflate a bunch of terms. So really, this is what we're seeing now. Sorry, I feel like I interrupted somebody. Ray, go ahead. Did you want to talk?
I was going to say something, then I lost my train of thought.
I'm so sorry.
It's absolutely fine. But I was flipping through the book and I was trying to, I think it was talking about like young Black children learning to read and write and like how they were like so hopeful about what this could do for them. And I think it goes back to the point that Therese made about they want to keep you stupid. Like that's 100% accurate. And I think it's something that unfortunately like is still sort of prevalent. Like
almost definitely.
Yeah, like I was in an Uber or something and I work on a college campus. So I was headed to the university and they're like, oh, like, are you? And I was like, no, I graduated years ago. And they're like, oh my God, like so surprised. And I'm just like, shut up, drive.
Your business.
And it's just like, I'm a grown ass adult. Like I'm not stupid. And yes, I am educated. I did go to I graduated from a Jesuit university. Probably would have changed that if I could go back in time. But like, it's just like weird that like, as a Black woman, like people are surprised that I'm getting my master's or that I work in higher education. And I'm just like, okay, well, fuck you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah. Lo, any thoughts on education outside of read Pedagogy of the Oppressed?
Yeah, no, I keep thinking because this is, I'm not gonna talk too much because I'm about to cry, because this is what my grandma always said. Like, my grandma was so into studying because she was like, you need to, exactly. No, actually, this comment that this happens to me when I share that I'm a lawyer. This happens to me in Brazil as well. People are like, you're a lawyer? And I'm like, bitch, you don't look like a lawyer. What's a lawyer supposed to look like? Like, you know, and it's like, yeah, and definitely that.
Right.
And so my grandmother had this thing where she was like, you need to study, because if you study, you're going to get out of this poverty that she grew up in and her children grew up in. And so her kids all went to school, all finished school. Not all of them managed to finish college because college is still very elitist. But before everything went sideways and fucked it with Bolsonaro, thank you, US, for that. We actually had like a very incredible program of expanding superior education. And it was a very big source of pride that I was able to get into a very prestigious university, which was free, by the way. The best universities in Brazil are free. So I graduate law school with zero debt. So that is something that Brazil actually does right. But
I wish.
I wish.
No, but there's actually one aspect of Brazilian education, and I feel like because we're so attached to those leftist ways of thinking, and the reason why we're so attached to them is because Brazil went through a military dictatorship, and being a leftist was a reason why you would actually get persecuted. I was actually thinking about this, Rachel, today when I saw that video that you made on GM Bucktooth, and about, yeah, where she wrote about, you know, a dictatorship and they weed out everyone who thinks differently. I'm like, oh my God, you clearly never lived through a military dictatorship before, because you don't know shit. Like, no, it's so bad. I'm glad you read it for us, but also I'm sorry about that.
Thanks for taking over the team there.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, but like, anyway, but I feel like this is a huge aspect of military dictatorships in Latin America. When the revolution in Cuba actually worked out, the US went completely desperate, and so it started to support many coups in Latin America in succession. And Paraguay was already in a sort of military dictatorship, but the first actual coup that they supported was in Brazil in 1964. And so they started going into universities, finding people who are Marxists, finding people who are leftists, taking them to be tortured and killed. And so a lot of that happened. And so Brazilian education has this attachment to, and Latin American education has this attachment because it understood that this was something that was revolutionary enough that you would get tortured and die for it. And so this is why universities here are very structured in the sense of what can your university do for the community? What can you as a student do for this community? And so the ways in which education can be articulated, I feel it's not only important, and I feel, I'm sorry for making this critique on America, and maybe a little on Angela Davis as well.
No apologies. None.
But like, the thing is, I feel like there is in the United States a lot of individualism, even within the left. Because the thing is, you're going to get this education and you're going to better yourself. You're going to better yourself and your life. And you're going to, you know, there's a lot of things. But when you get into a superior education in Brazil, the idea is you are making something for the community. And so you have to work with certain projects and research in order to graduate. And you're making something for the community. And so I feel like there is even this individualistic aspect in you're going to make this and be better for yourself and have a better life. And when in fact, maybe what we should be looking for is changing how universities worldwide look. Because like, I was really shocked to learn that universities actually gentrified places in the US. This was absolutely mind-blowing to me, because universities here will deliberately go to the most impoverished places. We would go to favelas, and we have to do this to graduate in order to actually cause an impact on that society, actually cause an impact on that world. And so it's very different. And I feel like maybe shifting a little. And I feel like the entirety of the American left needs to shift a little from this individual aspect and try to think of, okay, how can we shape this community in a way? Or maybe I'm just thinking about Twitter leftists because, you know.
No, this is a really good point. So this reminds me of Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which I am hypercritical of because I hate it. I hate it.
Really? It's on my
I
TBR.
haven't read it yet.
Oh, I can't. So part of
But I want to read it just so I can like understand.
it's so long though.
It is.
Anyway, so the point that I'm getting to is the problem with it is that it was like, you know how these societies are really rich and people are really rich and they get higher education. Well, here they're doing that with magic. And it's like, that's it? That's all you have to say? And
No, they're doing it with exploitation of labor. Fuck.
This is set at Yale, where outside you step right outside of Yale, and it does not look like Yale anymore. It is absolutely gentrified, and she didn't have anything to say about that. She described every brick at Yale, but didn't talk about gentrification. I was appalled. I was so mad. So yes, that higher education absolutely.
Yeah. Also, like one final comment that I wanted to make is that Twitter leftists annoy me a lot because
I'm not going to grad school yet.
But like, I feel like especially people on the left have a lot of this issue where they talk really difficultly and it's inaccessible. Like I've seen some Twitter threads of people trying to explain like leftist concepts, and I'm a fucking attorney. I'm a human rights attorney. I have 7 years of legal education. I'm just finishing my master's degree and I can't understand a single word. And it's like, okay, who are you talking to? Because this shit is not for you to feel better about yourself. This is transformative. And so if you're making people feel dumb by actually talking theory to them, you're not helping at all. You're part of the problem. And so if you do that, people are like, ooh, but you're dumbing down the working class. I'm not fucking dumbing down the working class. It's just like people don't understand. Like, don't. I mean, I have a bone to pick about that. Anyway, I think Onyx asked the question too.
Yeah. Ray, did you want to, you don't have to answer in comments. I want to give you a chance to talk.
Okay. Yeah. So when I first started reading it, I like posted it on my TBR for TikTok or something. And somebody was like, oh, like, I'll be interested to see what you think about that because I've heard some people don't like it. And I personally, everything that Angela Davis stands for, well, almost everything, like, I wholeheartedly agree with, and I absolutely love her. So with this particular book, like, there are a lot of like quotes from other people and things that like are ridiculously stupid and that I don't agree with, but like her opinion specifically, there was nothing that I wholeheartedly disagreed with. For the most part, I did really relate to everything that she was saying, especially how she always brings the topic into the perspective of Black women, which is something that I really appreciate because, as we've been talking about a lot of times, some things are just framed in the view of white women, and women of color are always excluded. So for this one, no, I didn't feel I didn't disagree with anything that she said, and I did feel that she spoke on behalf of Black women.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering that, and thanks, and Jerry, for asking that. Let's see. I had other questions. Hold on. Okay, we went over education, suffragettes, working class. That's it. That's all I wrote down. Good Lord. Okay. I guess what were some themes? I asked you all to think about a book that you could recommend, either fiction or non, but I think I'm going to go about that a different way. What are some themes that you saw portrayed in here that you feel like should be, not themes because she's explicitly stating them, but what are themes that you hope to see in fiction, or if you just want to recommend a nonfiction that also talks about similar things Davis talked about in the book? If you guys want to talk about, like, what are some themes you would like to see portrayed in fiction that Angela talked about in this book? That's my question. Okay.
I can't actually speak on it just yet, but reading this inspired me to pick up Hood Feminism. So I'm going to be reading.
I was going to recommend Hood Feminism, actually.
It's so good.
This month, so I'm super excited because after I finished reading this, I was like, "Oh, somebody bought me Hood Feminism. I gotta read it now. I gotta compare notes and see how that goes." But I will say that one author that I do enjoy is Jodi Picoult. She's a white woman, but she did write a book about racism in America. It's called Small Great Things. There were talks about making it a movie with Viola Davis, so hopefully that still happens. Okay. But I personally really like her as an author because she tackles those tough topics that people don't always want to talk about. Like A Spark of Light is about an abortion clinic, or no, well, yeah, it's an abortion clinic. And then like you learn different stories about the people that are there, and someone comes in and like starts shooting. And then you start to find out all of these different stories about each character that unravel, and everything really comes together really nicely at the end. She also has a book where she talks about rape culture and things like that. So she's definitely an author that I really enjoy because I like reading about important topics in fiction, which I feel like a lot of people don't. But to me, that's something that I find really valuable. So pretty much any of her work is something that I love.
Go Jodi. Who knew?
Right.
I love, and Jerry, I knew you were going to bring up Octavia Butler. Broken Earth Trilogy, I have not read yet, but
me neither.
I read the first book. I need to pick up the rest.
Yeah, I just so much. Oh my goodness. If you guys have not read The City We Became, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. Let's see. Question: is this book still relevant in 2021?
Yes.
Yes.
I think so, but I think I should take a back seat on this and let you guys talk about it.
Rachel, I don't know what to say. Whenever I have to teach a class, I'm like, hello, Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis. Required reading right now.
Whenever I text you, you're always like, have you read?
No, there are two books that Rachel are like, I am confused about this. And I'm like, read Women, Race, and Class or read Caliban and the Witch. My answers are always two. Yeah.
I think so. I think it's still relevant in 2021. Ray, what do you think?
It is 100%. As I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of the things that are mentioned in this book are things that we're still dealing with today, which is ridiculous, but is also a trend, especially in America. So as disappointing as that is, I think there's a lot to take away from this, and that can be applied right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Therese, if you want to answer, and then if you want to talk about themes in fiction. Sorry, going back to the...
No, you're good. I do think it is relevant. Like Ray said, it's stuff that we're still talking about to this day. It has a lot of topics that, like, I feel like, not say glossed over, but I feel like the white perspective could definitely use a little bit of a slap in the face to read. As for themes, I would like to see a lot more on, like, abortion themes, as triggering as it might be, from a BIPOC perspective. Every time we talk about abortion, every single time, it's always The Handmaid's Tale, you guys. It's The Handmaid's Tale. And I'm like, y'all, I'm over it.
Yes, it's not even just abortion. It's anything to do with reproductive rights meets dystopia. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're good. I agree. It's like everyone always talks about The Handmaid's Tale. I'm like, I get it. It's like discusses the topic, but like people of color have been saying this shit for who knows how long, and you guys are the only takeaway that you guys have is the perspective of a white person who completely bulldozes over the discussions of like other BIPOC women. But sure, let's just keep talking.
Yes. I've said it before, and I will say it again. The problem with the whole reproductive rights only being centered on The Handmaid's Tale is The Handmaid's Tale entirely leaves out, you created this entire dystopian where women are subjective and suddenly all women are equally subjective. I don't think so. I don't think that would happen. I don't think so. So that is why I do not ever recommend that book. And the fact that every book, and there's been a lot lately about reproductive rights, is this meets The Handmaid's Tale. We have got to move beyond that. Society has progressed beyond the need
for The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, and it's funny that Therese brought that up, because I actually saw a TikTok that was like, I need you to stop comparing what's happening to The Handmaid's Tale, because that is fiction, whereas the father of gynecology experimenting on Black women is real. The missing and murdered Indigenous women is real. Like, there are actual realities happening that are more relevant than this fictional story that y'all are obsessed with.
Yes, what happened to Puerto Rican women, that's real. Like, we cannot we can't have a conversation about reproductive rights without centering the experiences of BIPOC women. It just doesn't. It's half of a conversation. It's not even a conversation. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
Lo, apparently you should read Everfair by Nisi.
I am going to put it on the list. I have a very long TBR to get through, but
from one lawyer to another. Good feminism, definitely.
I have to come clean. I haven't read that one yet.
It's good. I think it's a good intro to like intersectional feminism.
Yeah.
There's a line specifically that talks about where the author mentions that like every single issue that we see today regarding race and class and money is at its heart a feminist issue. And then we need to stop seeing it as completely like separate issues from one another. They need to be under one umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
As Angela Davis would agree with in Freedom is a Constant Struggle. You can't divorce anything from anything else. Everything is connected. The freedom fighters in Palestine are connected to the ones in Ferguson, Missouri. Everything is connected. Mm-hmm. I love her so much. If I haven't already said it, I don't know if I mentioned this, you should totally read Freedom is a Constant Struggle.
Yeah.
The audiobook is in her voice, and her voice is delightful. It's so soothing.
She's so good to listen to.
Yes.
Like whenever, it's so good to listen to.
I love her so much. Has anyone ever Googled Margaret Atwood's views on certain women's issues? Oh no.
I do know that I think that she's not a TERF. I think I've seen that before. That she's not a TERF, that she completely disagrees and stuff, which is the bare fucking minimum. But yeah, no, I don't really I haven't read that yet.
I think I could be wrong, very wrong. But I think when her second book came out, she had discussed that like she wrote Handmaid's Tale with a white view in mind. Mm-hmm. That's the only other thing that I've heard. So I think that's why she wrote the second book, but I don't feel the need to read the second book.
I almost wish that she would come out and say, stop comparing everything to The Handmaid's Tale. I feel like she has the responsibility to do that as the person who wrote the fucking book.
Yeah, and then offer like other books that discuss reproductive rights.
Yeah, if she's moved towards the viewpoint that it's very much from a white lens, then I think it is on her to actively work to fix that. Because that is, and I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm really annoyed with the phenomena of comparing every single thing to that book when it is white-centric.
There is a problem. Her book is very dated. I think that's the issue. It's not a new book. It's an old book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it is dated to the feminist views at the time. Mm-hmm. And specifically, what I do remember of The Handmaid's Tale, I haven't read it, but there is a part where they talk about radical feminists and how at a certain point, radical feminists and what radical feminists understood to be the best way to protect women's issue actually coincided with conservative views, which is why things happened the way that it did. So I feel like it was mostly a critique on radical feminists in that regard, which I'm up for. But the main critique that must be made on it's an interesting comment, Knox, because the other day I just sent like a 4-minute audio to Rachel and be like, so 1984, it's actually, because I actually like the book quite a lot. But yeah, I feel like you can't criticize radical feminism without bringing up women of color. And so,
stop it.
Which is actually a really good book, though. Like, they don't understand it, but it's a really good book. No one ever mentioned.
I want to read. I haven't read 1984 or Fahrenheit 451. I want to, but then every time something happens regarding like those specific topics, someone's like, "Oh my God, it's like this," and I'm like, maybe I don't need to read it.
It's actually pretty good. I am very surprised that they never mentioned Brave New World, but Brave New World is a capitalist dystopia. So I'm like, okay.
I am not surprised that they never bring it up.
Yeah.
Let's see. It's always the same 3 books used. Yeah, don't we know it? Okay, another book rec. Starhawks the Fifth. Oh, okay. There's a bug. Sorry.
One thing that I do read a lot, and it reminds me a lot. I read a lot of Toni Morrison whenever I'm like dealing with Angela Davis. There is this part, and especially about women in slavery, and how this is extremely triggering, but Beloved really goes really into this. That book completely destroyed me, so proceed with caution. But yeah, I feel like discusses a little bit, especially of the themes that she's talking, because there is this part where she talks a lot about like how there was this sense of community within the Black community, the slave community, the enslaved Black community in the United States, because you needed this to survive. Like there was no other way you would survive this. So you actually needed to develop this. And I feel like Toni Morrison's books actually dwell into this quite a lot, which is interesting for me for the cultural context, because as I said, like slavery in Brazil worked very differently. Like in the United States, correct me if I'm wrong, but if in the United States, the plantation actually had cabins, right? And that multiple families were going to be in the cabins, but they actually were able to live almost like a villa or something. And then there's another book that I read for college. It's called Scenes of Subjection, that actually goes into self-making, the enslaved person self-making in the US. I really liked it, but I wouldn't recommend this book. It's kind of like, it's a difficult read, even for me, but emotionally. But in Brazil, that did not happen that way at all. In Brazil, you had sort of like a warehouse, and the warehouse would be attached to the main house, and so it would be like a women's warehouse and a male's black like warehouse, and so that was called senzala. And so you couldn't form communities in that space, mostly because most people did not survive to form communities in that space. At any given point in history, enslaved African, there were more slaves in the United States than there were ever in Brazil, and Brazil received 45% of all people who were stolen from Africa. And so the brutality of that is made things go really different. Onyx is actually saying that it didn't work like that, but yeah, sure. I don't like, it's not villas. I think I actually might have expressed myself kind of weirdly, but I do remember watching like documentaries about the cabins and stuff. And
yeah,
this was a very
cabins. I think that in some places, yes. I guess it really is so dependent on who the slave owner was, and I don't know how much of that is documented, because I don't necessarily think that anybody back then cared to document how people who were enslaved were living at the time.
Actually, fun fact, there is more documentation on that in the United States than there is in Brazil. So, really? Like, almost everything was completely lost.
Jesus.
So
we talked earlier about how things were in the past and how they are reflected today. What do you think things will look like going forward in the future?
We're all gonna die in the climate crisis, and then you can't have racism if you're dead.
You're not wrong.
You're not wrong.
Anybody can go. If you need a second, that's okay too. I think that it won't look like The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh.
The next time someone it's such a trigger, I'm okay. We're good. We're good.
Thanks for coming in, Jerry.
Thank you.
I think that this is a big book selling point now, is selling books based on futuristic, what will things look like in the future for reproductive rights, and for, you know, like dystopian is sort of coming back around, but not so much just talking about like, you know, what teenagers will do to overthrow the government, but what that will mean for people of certain classes.
The teenagers will go to like alien worlds to overthrow the government there.
They'll overthrow alien governments before they find a way to overthrow our governments. It's fine.
And throw in some commentary on gun control in the meantime.
But they won't bring anything with them to help them overthrow this government. They won't even make a plan. They'll just go.
Nope.
What the hell? I think that there's a lot of books coming out about that, and I think that that's really interesting, because I think that that's something we're thinking about a lot, is what's going to happen in the future. What is the feminist movement going to look like then? What will racism and sexism and classism look like, since we're seeing it mirrored already now, similar things that were struggles hundreds of years ago. If you have a book recommendation, I don't know what it will look like, but I hope that the feminist movement gets even more decolonial.
Mm-hmm. I think that this is a key part of dismantling, you know, this entire system, because you have to understand colonialism and imperialism in order to, you know, get this out. And I hope that we are going to center more Global South voices in this debate. Angela Davis herself has this. Whenever she goes to Brazil, she comes to Brazil, she's like, you don't have to read me. You have so many Black authors who are amazing. You have to read Lélia Gonzalez, who's like an amazing Brazilian writer who's almost never translated, but actually manages to articulate many things. And I feel like if we decenter specifically the United States from the debate, we're going to be able to see that a lot of people from a lot of places are able to articulate things that we might not, that, you know, a lot of people are coming around and thinking like we're reinventing the wheel, and it's like, no, a lot of people have been discussing this before. So yeah.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any final thoughts? I'm going to have everybody recommend a book, any book that you feel like is good for any of the topics within Angela Davis's book, but just like feminism in general. One that I would recommend is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. I feel like that, man, does that pack a punch? That really talks about it, and it's sci-fi. It talks about the intersection of class and race and gender. That really is the entirety of that book. So that's one I would recommend. So either fiction or nonfiction, go for it.
I already mentioned my recommendation, which is Hood Feminism. I think if you, because I think a lot of what I understood from this book helped, like it was easier to digest the huge blocks of text, because I had initially read Hood Feminism before this, and it discusses a lot of like the necessity for intersectional feminism, and discusses a lot of the topics in women, race, and class in a beginner format if you're kind of new to the sphere or want to dig deeper.
I would agree with that, because I read Hood Feminism before I read Women, Race, and Class, and that was helpful for me to have read it first. So anyway, sorry, go ahead. Lo, you can go, or Ray, either one.
Ray, you can go. I'm trying to hold my internal list.
I think I'll go with A Spark of Light, just by Jodi Picoult, just because of the topic of abortion and women's reproductive rights. It's like such a hot topic right now, even though we've been saying the same shit for years and years. Because I have a handbook for a post-row America, but I haven't read it yet. So I'm probably going to be reading that one soon too.
So good.
But I can't recommend it yet because I haven't read it. But so I'll stick with that.
Yeah. I'm gonna recommend an author. I think that if you read Angela Davis and you loved it, you have to read Bell Hooks. Like, it's
Okay.
very, very similar. There are 3 books by Bell Hooks that I think are incredible. Feminism is for Everybody, Passionate Politics is a great place to start. When I read it the first time in my first year of college, I thought it was a little bit above my understanding of feminism at the time. I used to recommend we should all be feminists, but my mom didn't go to a DJ. But she's a TERF, so we're not doing that anymore, which broke my heart in 1,000 pieces. But
I found out, you know, when I found out in my first live show for this. Yeah.
I am so sorry.
No.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, we don't recommend that, but I feel like Feminism is for Everybody is requires a little bit more elbow grease to understand it, but it's a good place. There's another book of essays that she wrote. It's called Talking Back, Thinking Feminist, Thinking Black. Also, I don't want to flex my Brazilian editions and stuff, but this is the Brazilian edition of the book.
That's so
It's
pretty.
absolutely
nice.
gorgeous. And it's like the cover is kind of soft. I don't know how to describe this, but it's like it's really good. It's really pretty. So I'm flexing a little.
Do you want to flex your cover of Women Race in Class for the class?
Oh yeah,
Make us sad again.
I'm gonna flex it again. The inside of it is so cool too. Like the entirety of it is so cool. Yeah.
Wow.
It's really cool. I'm
over here like, wow, why don't I deserve anything in America? I did, Max. I did get so sad. I was heartbroken. I didn't want to believe it. I was like, no.
Yeah. Oh my God. Someone bought me one of Chimamanda's books for my birthday, and like I was like, oh, I'm not gonna read this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was heartbroken. I bought like We Should All Be Feminists to everybody. Gave it to my mom, to my sibling, to my cousins, to my aunts. Like I bought it for everybody. And then she was a TERF and I was heartbroken. So yeah, but Bell Hooks, really good.
Bell Hooks it is.
Yeah, but there's another book by Bell Hooks. It's called Ain't I a Woman? And it's more about Black women and feminism. She goes really over, the formation of the idea of a Black woman, like what does it entail, and et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like it has less of a class discussion than Angela Davis. Bell Hooks is not as Marxist as Angela Davis, but she adheres a lot to Paulo Freire, who wrote, how do you say that word, Rachel?
Pedagogy.
Okay, thank you. Pedagogy of the Oppressed. She's also she studies in the same field, and so she has a way of writing that it just feels like someone is like wrapping their hands around you and being like, it's gonna be okay, let's learn a little together. So Bell Hooks, really good recommendation.
All right, I guess that is it. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you everybody in the chat for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. I definitely want to have all of you back. Lo is like a constant on here. I'm always begging her to help me with everything in my life. So I'd love to have you both back on. Next month, we are reading Carmen Maria Machado's book, Her Body and Other Parties. That's it.
I've read that one. Recommend.
Yes, I'm really excited. I loved her other books, so I'm so excited. Thank you for being here, Knox. All right. We will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.